The dust never settled proper in Copper Ridge. It hung in the air like memories that refused to fade, coating everything in a fine layer of the past. Samuel Whitmore had grown accustomed to the taste of it, the way it mixed with his morning coffee and settled between his teeth. He stood on the weathered porch of his ranch house, watching the sun paint the horizon in shades of amber and rust, same as he had every morning for the past 15 years. The Lazy W Ranch had seen better days. Samuel could remember when the pastures stretched green and full, when the sound of cattle lowing filled the air from dawn to dusk. Now, patches of scrub brush and hardpan dotted the landscape where grass once grew thick. The drought had been merciless, and the bank notices piling up on his kitchen table served as daily reminders that time was running short. He was a man carved from the same stone as the mesa that rose behind his property, weathered and worn but still standing. His hands bore the calluses of decades spent working the land, and his eyes held the particular sadness of someone who had buried too many dreams in the unforgiving soil. At 52, Samuel Whitmore was facing the possibility that everything he had built might crumble to dust, just like everything else in this godforsaken territory. The sound of approaching hoofbeats broke through his morning contemplation. A lone rider emerged from the heat shimmer, moving with the steady purpose of someone who knew exactly where they were headed. Samuel squinted against the rising sun, trying to make out the figure. Visitors were rare this far from town, and unexpected ones even rarer. As the rider drew closer, Samuel realized with surprise that it was a woman. She sat her horse with the easy confidence of someone born to the saddle, her dark hair pulled back beneath a worn hat. Her clothes were practical, trailed dusty. But there was something in the way she carried herself that spoke of dignity maintained despite whatever hardships had brought her to his door. She reined in her horse at the edge of his porch, and Samuel got his first clear look at her face. She was younger than he had first thought, perhaps in her early 30s, with intelligent green eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. There were lines around those eyes that spoke of squinting against sun and wind, and her hands on the reins showed the same honest wear that marked his own. "Morning," she said, her voice carrying a slight accent he couldn't quite place. "You'd be Samuel Whitmore, I'm guessing." "That I am," Samuel replied, stepping down from the porch. "And you are?" "Helena Vasquez." She dismounted with fluid grace, never taking her eyes off his face. "I've come about work." Samuel felt a familiar weight settle in his chest. He had let his last 2 hands go 3 months ago when the money ran out, and the work had been piling up ever since. But he couldn't afford to hire anyone, no matter how desperately he needed the help. "I appreciate you riding all the way out here, miss, but I'm afraid I can't," he began. "I'm not looking for wages," Helena interrupted, and something in her tone made Samuel stop short. "I'm looking for a place to work to belong. I can earn my keep and more, if you'll give me the chance to prove it." Samuel studied her face, searching for the desperation he expected to find. Instead, he saw determination, pride held intact despite whatever circumstances had brought her here. "What kind of work you looking to do?" "Whatever needs doing." Helena gestured toward the ranch buildings, and Samuel saw them through her eyes, noting the sagging gate, the fence posts that needed replacing, the barn roof with its missing shingles. "I can mend fence, work cattle, break horses. I can cook, tend a garden, keep books if needed. My father taught me that honest work was its own reward, and I've never found reason to doubt him." There was something in the way she spoke of her father, a note of loss that Samuel recognized. He found himself wondering what her story was, what had brought her to his doorstep offering work without wages. It was the kind of desperation that came wrapped in pride, the most dangerous kind because it was the hardest to recognize. "Where you been working before this?" Samuel asked. Elena's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Had a place down in the Panhandle. Things didn't work out." She met his eyes directly. "I give you my word that it was through no fault of my own, and that I'm good for any work you put in front of me." Samuel believed her. There was an honesty in her bearing that was hard to fake, and something about her reminded him of his late wife, Margaret, who had possessed the same quiet strength. Margaret had been gone 3 years now, taken by the fever that swept through the territory, and the ranch had felt empty ever since. "You got family somewhere?" Samuel asked. "People who might be worrying about you?" "No, sir. It's just me now." Elena's voice remained steady, but Samuel caught a flicker of something vulnerable in her expression. "I know it's unusual, a woman traveling alone, asking for work, but I'm not asking for charity. I'm offering a fair trade. My labor for room and board. Samuel looked out across his struggling ranch, calculating the work that needed doing against his dwindling resources. The bank would foreclose within the year if things didn't turn around, and he couldn't do it all alone. But taking in a stranger, especially a woman with no family and no apparent ties, carried its own risks. People in town might talk, he said finally. Elena's chin lifted slightly. People always talk, Mr. Whitmore. The question is whether you care more about their talk or about saving your ranch. The bluntness of her statement caught Samuel off guard, but he found himself almost smiling. Margaret would have said something similar, cutting straight to the heart of the matter without dancing around the edges. All right, Miss Vasquez, Samuel said. We'll try it for a month. You can use the bunkhouse and I'll provide meals and whatever supplies you need. If it works out, we'll talk about making it permanent. Something like relief flickered across Elena's features, quickly masked but not quite hidden. Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. You won't regret this decision. Samuel hoped she was right. As he watched her lead her horse toward the barn, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just changed the course of his life in ways he couldn't yet understand. Elena proved herself within the first week. Samuel woke each morning to find chores already begun, fences mended with skill that spoke of long experience, and the kind of attention to detail that came from genuine care rather than mere obligation. She worked with a quiet intensity that reminded him of his own younger self. When the ranch had been more dream than reality, she had a way with the horses that bordered on magical. The old gelding that had been favoring his left front leg for months began moving sound again under her gentle ministrations. She spent hours with the animals, talking to them in a mixture of English and Spanish, her voice carrying a warmth that Samuel rarely heard when she spoke to him. It was during the second week that Samuel began to understand there was more to Elena's story than she had revealed. He found her one evening sitting by the corral, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. There were tears on her cheeks, though she wiped them away quickly when she noticed his approach. Beautiful evening, Samuel said, settling onto the fence rail beside her. Yes, Elena agreed, her voice carefully controlled. Reminds me of home. The Panhandle. Elena was quiet for so long that Samuel thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her words carried the weight of carefully guarded pain. My father had a small ranch outside of Santa Fe. Nothing grand, but it was ours. He taught me everything about working the land, said that a person who understood animals and respected the earth would never want for honest work. She paused, her hands clasping and unclasping in her lap. He died 2 years ago, thrown from a horse that spooked at a rattler. Samuel felt the familiar ache of shared loss. I'm sorry. Losing a parent is never easy, no matter how old you are. The ranch was heavily mortgaged. When I couldn't make the payments alone, the bank took it. I tried to find work nearby, but Elena's voice trailed off and Samuel sensed there was more to that story as well. But, he prompted gently. Elena's expression hardened. There was a man, the bank president's son. He decided he wanted more than just my father's land. When I made it clear that his attentions were unwelcome, he made sure that no one in the territory would hire me. Said I was unreliable, untrustworthy. Her hands clenched into fists. I had to leave everything I knew behind and start over somewhere else. Samuel felt a surge of anger on her behalf. He had seen such men before, those who used their position and influence to prey on the vulnerable. That Elena had chosen to leave rather than submit spoke to a strength of character that he deeply respected. His loss, Samuel said simply, and my gain, if you'll pardon my saying so. Elena looked at him with surprise, and Samuel realized it had been a long time since someone had seen her worth without expecting something in return. The thought made him sad for reasons he couldn't quite articulate. As the days turned to weeks, Samuel found himself looking forward to their evening conversations. Elena had a sharp mind and a dry wit that emerged once she began to trust him. She spoke knowledgeably about cattle prices and weather patterns, about the delicate balance of working with the land rather than against it. Her insights helped him see solutions to problems that had been troubling him for months. More than that, she brought life back to the ranch in ways that went beyond the practical improvements. The sound of her voice as she sang while working, the sight of her hat bobbing over the garden she had planted behind the house, the warm glow of lamplight from the bunkhouse in the evenings, all of it made the Lazy W feel like a home again, rather than just a place where Samuel was slowly failing. It was Elena who suggested they try raising sheep in addition to cattle. The idea had never occurred to Samuel, but as she explained the economics of it, he began to see the wisdom. Sheep were hardy, required less water than cattle, and wool prices were steady. It wasn't a complete solution to his financial problems, but it was a start. Where would we get the sheep? Samuel asked as they walked the perimeter of the south pasture, Alina pointing out areas where the grass was beginning to recover thanks to her careful irrigation work. There's a man up in Colorado, sells quality breeding stock. I could ride up there, pick out a small starter herd. Elena's eyes held an excitement that Samuel hadn't seen before. With proper management, we could build it into something substantial within a few years. Samuel found himself nodding, caught up in her enthusiasm. It had been years since he had allowed himself to plan more than a season ahead, but Alina's confidence was infectious. For the first time since Margaret's death, he began to believe that the ranch might have a future. The first real test of their partnership came in late summer, when a violent storm swept across the territory. Samuel woke to the sound of thunder and driving rain, and his first thought was for the cattle scattered across the range. In weather like this, they would bunch together in whatever shelter they could find, and it would be easy for them to wander off or get trapped in arroyos that could flood without warning. Elena was already in the barn when Samuel arrived, saddling her horse with quick, efficient movements. She had somehow managed to get her slicker on without getting soaked, while Samuel felt like he had been swimming in his clothes. South pasture, Elena called over the storm's roar. I saw lightning strike near Devil's Canyon. If the cattle spooked, they'll head for the low ground. Samuel nodded, impressed by her quick thinking. Devil's Canyon was a natural trap in weather like this, and they needed to reach the cattle before the flash floods arrived. They rode out into the storm together, their horses picking their way carefully across terrain made treacherous by sheets of rain and gusting wind. They found the cattle huddled in exactly the wrong place, crowded into a narrow draw that would become a raging torrent when the water came down from the hills. Elena took the lead without hesitation, her horse splashing through puddles that were already beginning to merge into streams. She began working the cattle with a skill that took Samuel's breath away, her movements perfectly timed to turn the herd without causing a panic. Samuel fell in beside her, and together they managed to move the frightened animals to higher ground, just as the first wave of floodwater swept through the draw where they had been trapped. It was close, closer than Samuel liked to think about, but they had saved the herd. As they rode back toward the ranch, both of them soaked to the skin but victorious, Samuel felt something shift in his chest. Elena wasn't just an employee or even a partner in the traditional sense. She was someone who understood the rhythm of his life, who could anticipate what needed doing without being told, who shared the satisfaction of hard work well done. Thank you, he called to her over the diminishing storm. Elena turned in her saddle, rain streaming from the brim of her hat. For what? For caring about this place like it was your own. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that went deeper than words. Elena's smile was radiant despite the rain, and Samuel felt his heart do something it hadn't done in years. The realization that he was falling in love with Elena Vasquez came to Samuel gradually, like sunrise over the mountains. It wasn't the desperate passion of his youth, but something deeper and more solid, built on respect and shared purpose and the quiet pleasure of her company. He found himself looking for excuses to work beside her, treasuring the sound of her laughter and the way her eyes lit up when she talked about plans for the ranch. But along with the growing warmth came uncertainty. Elena had been clear from the beginning that she wasn't looking for anything beyond work and a place to belong. She had been hurt by men who saw her as something to be taken rather than someone to be cherished, and Samuel was careful not to push beyond the boundaries she had established. Still, he couldn't help but notice the way she looked at him sometimes, a softness in her expression that suggested her feelings might be evolving as well. When their hands brushed as they worked together, she didn't pull away. When they sat together in the evenings, she seemed to settle more comfortably into the shared silence. It was Elena who brought up the subject of the future first, on an evening in early fall when the first frost had touched the edges of the grass. They were sitting on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the clear desert sky when she suddenly spoke. "The month's trial is long over," she said quietly. "Why never did talk about making this arrangement permanent?" Samuel felt his heart skip. What would you like to talk about? Elena was quiet for a long moment, and Samuel could see her gathering her courage. I know this might sound presumptuous, but I've come to think of this place as home. Not just somewhere I'm working, but actually home. I've never felt that way about anywhere since my father died. It is your home, Samuel said softly, as long as you want it to be. Elena turned to look at him directly, and Samuel saw his own feelings reflected in her eyes. I want it to be. But I need to know where we stand. Samuel, this partnership we've built, it's become something more than just working together. At least, it has for me. Samuel's heart hammered in his chest. Elena, I'm not asking for promises or declarations. Elena continued, her voice steady despite the vulnerability in her words. I'm just asking for honesty. Do you see a future where this could be something more than just a business arrangement? Samuel reached for her hand, marveling at the way it fit perfectly in his own. I see a future where you're the best part of every day. Where we build something together that's bigger than what either of us could create alone. If that's what you're asking about, then yes, I see that future very clearly. Elena's smile was like the sun coming up, warm and bright and full of promise. Then I guess we should start planning for it. The kiss that followed was gentle and sweet, tasting of hope and new beginnings. When they finally broke apart, Samuel rested his forehead against hers, breathing in the scent of her hair and the promise of the life they might build together. There's something else, Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper, about why I really left the Panhandle. Samuel pulled back to look at her, seeing the fear in her eyes. You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to share. Elena shook her head. You deserve to know the whole truth. That man I mentioned, the banker's son, he didn't just make it hard for me to find work. When I refused his advances, he spread rumors that I was a woman of loose morals, that I had been my father's partner in more than just ranching. Her voice hardened with remembered anger. He even went so far as to claim that the ranch's debts were my fault, that I had been stealing from my father. Samuel felt rage surge through him, hot and protective. The thought of anyone attacking Elena's character, her relationship with her father, made him want to ride to New Mexico and settle the matter personally. None of that is true, Elena continued. But truth doesn't matter when a man with money and influence decides to destroy your reputation. I had to leave, had to start over somewhere no one knew those lies. Coming here, finding you, it's the first time in 2 years that I've felt like I could be myself again. Samuel cupped her face in his hands, looking directly into her eyes. Elena Vasquez, you are the finest woman I've ever known. Your father would be proud of the person you've become, and anyone who can't see your worth is a fool. That includes every person who believed those lies without knowing your heart. Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks, but they were tears of relief rather than sorrow. I was so afraid you would think less of me, that you would wonder if there was truth in the rumors. Never, Samuel said firmly. I've seen who you are in the way you care for the animals, in the way you've brought this ranch back to life, in the way you face every challenge with courage and integrity. That's worth more than all the talk in the world. Elena kissed him again, and this time there was a desperation in it, as if she was trying to pour all her gratitude and relief and growing love into that single moment of connection. Samuel held her close, marveling at the strength of the woman in his arms and the unexpected gift of finding love when he had thought that part of his life was over. They were married on a crisp morning in October, with the pastor from town and Elena's carefully tended garden as their witnesses. Elena wore a simple blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes, and Samuel had never seen anything more beautiful in his life. The ceremony was small and private, just the way they both wanted it, focused on the promises they were making rather than the celebration around them. Elena had worried about the gossip their marriage might cause, but Samuel found he cared less about other people's opinions than he had ever thought possible. What mattered was the joy in Elena's face as she said her vows, the way her hand trembled slightly as he slipped the ring onto her finger, the certainty in his own heart that this was exactly where he belonged. Their first winter as husband and wife was the best Samuel had known in years. Elena moved her belongings from the bunkhouse to the main house, and suddenly the rooms that had felt empty and cold were filled with warmth and laughter. She brought feminine touches that transformed the house without erasing its character. Curtains that let in the light while providing privacy, a rocking chair on the porch where she could sit and watch the sunset, the scent of bread baking and herbs growing on the kitchen windowsill. More than the physical changes, though, was the sense of partnership that infused every aspect of their daily life. Samuel had forgotten what it was like to share the burden of decisions, to have someone who understood the challenges of ranch life without needing explanations. Elena's practical insights and willingness to work alongside him made every task easier and more enjoyable. The sheep venture proved even more successful than they had hoped. Elena had an instinct for breeding that resulted in healthy lambs and high-quality wool. By spring, they were able to pay down a significant portion of the ranch's debt, and Samuel began to believe that they might actually save the Lazy W. But their greatest success was less tangible and more profound. Elena had brought more than practical skills to the ranch. She had brought hope. Samuel found himself making plans that extended years into the future, imagining improvements and expansions that once would have seemed like impossible dreams. With Elena beside him, the future looked bright and full of possibility. The transformation wasn't just in Samuel's outlook. Elena bloomed in the security and acceptance she found at the Lazy W. The wariness that had shadowed her eyes when she first arrived was replaced by confidence and joy. She laughed more easily, spoke more freely about her dreams and opinions, and carried herself with the dignity of a woman who knew she was valued and loved. Their happiness was tested the following summer when a stranger rode up to the ranch house, asking questions about Elena. Samuel watched from the porch as Elena went pale, recognizing something in the man's bearing that spoke of the past she had tried to leave behind. The stranger introduced himself as Thomas Brennan, and he claimed to be looking for a woman matching Elena's description in connection with some missing money from a ranch in New Mexico. His questions were polite but pointed, and Samuel could see that he was fishing for information, trying to determine if Elena was indeed the woman he sought. Elena handled the interrogation with remarkable composure, answering his questions truthfully but without providing more information than necessary. Yes, she had worked on a ranch in New Mexico. No, she had no knowledge of missing money. Yes, she had left under difficult circumstances, but those circumstances involved harassment, not theft. Brennan seemed disappointed by her straightforward responses, as if he had expected to find guilt or evasion. When it became clear that Elena had nothing to hide, he began to lose interest in his investigation. "Seems like I may have gotten some bad information," Brennan admitted as he prepared to leave. "Sorry to have troubled you folks," after he rode away. Elena sagged against the porch railing, the strength that had carried her through the confrontation finally giving way to exhaustion. "That was about the banker's son, wasn't it?" Samuel asked gently. Elena nodded. "He must have hired someone to look for me, probably hoping to find evidence to back up his lies. Either way, he won't find anything, because I never did anything wrong." Samuel pulled her into his arms, feeling the tremor that ran through her body. "It's over now." He sent his man to investigate, and the man found nothing because there's nothing to find. Even if he doesn't give up completely, he'll have to look somewhere else. Elena pressed her face against Samuel's chest, drawing strength from his steady heartbeat. "I just want to live in peace, to build a life here with you without having to look over my shoulder." "That's exactly what we're going to do," Samuel promised. "This is our home, our life, and no one from your past has the power to change that unless we let them." The incident served to strengthen their bond rather than weaken it. Samuel's unwavering support during Elena's moment of vulnerability showed her that she truly had found a partner who would stand with her through any storm. Elena's grace under pressure reminded Samuel of why he had fallen in love with her in the first place. As autumn painted the landscape again, they received news that brought their past full circle. A letter arrived from New Mexico, bearing official seals and formal language that made Elena's hands shake as she read it. The banker's son had been arrested for embezzlement, his schemes finally catching up with him. The investigation had revealed that he had been systematically stealing from the bank for years, using his position to cover his tracks and deflect suspicion onto others. Elena's name was mentioned in the letter as one of several people who had been falsely accused by the man in his attempts to hide his own crimes. The authorities offered official apologies and asked if she wished to pursue damages for the harm done to her reputation. Elena read the letter twice before setting it aside with a calmness that surprised Samuel. He had expected anger, vindication, some reaction to this complete reversal of the accusations that had driven her from her home. "How do you feel?" Samuel asked carefully. Elena considered the question seriously. "Relieved, I suppose. It's good to know that the truth has finally come out, that my father's memory has been cleared of any association with that man's crimes." She paused, looking out toward the pastures where their sheep grazed peacefully. "But mostly I feel grateful. If none of that had happened, if I hadn't been forced to leave, I never would have found my way here. I never would have found you." Samuel marveled at her perspective, the way she could see blessing in what had once been her greatest trial. It was one of the things he loved most about Alina, her ability to find meaning and hope even in difficult circumstances. "Do you want to go back?" Samuel asked. "Now that your name has been cleared, you could reclaim your place there." Alina shook her head without hesitation. "My place is here with you, building the life we've started together. The past is past, and I'm more interested in our future." That future arrived sooner than they expected, in the form of a letter from Alina's lawyer in New Mexico. The banker's son's assets were being liquidated to pay back what he had stolen, and as part of the settlement, Alina was entitled to compensation for the ranch her father had lost. The amount was substantial enough to pay off the remaining debts on the Lazy W and provide capital for the expansions they had been dreaming about. Alina stared at the letter in disbelief. "It's like getting my father's legacy back," she whispered. "He always said that honest work would be rewarded in the end, and somehow he was right." Samuel felt a deep satisfaction at this vindication of Alina's faith in her father's wisdom. The money would transform their prospects, but more important was the sense of justice finally served, of Alina's character fully vindicated. They used the settlement money wisely, investing in improvements that would benefit the ranch for years to come. They expanded the sheep operation, improved the water systems, and built new facilities that would allow them to diversify their livestock. But they were careful not to grow too fast or take on more debt than they could handle. Alina's experience with losing everything had taught them both the value of financial prudence. The success of their ranch began to attract attention from their neighbors, many of whom had initially been skeptical of Samuel's decision to hire Alina. Her innovations in sheep breeding and pasture management were proving their worth, and other ranchers began asking for her advice. Alina found herself becoming an informal consultant, helping other struggling operations find new approaches to old problems. Samuel watched with pride as Alina gained recognition for her expertise and character. The woman who had arrived at his ranch with nothing, but her willingness to work, had become a respected member of the community, sought out for her wisdom and valued for her integrity. It was a complete transformation from the isolation and suspicion she had faced in New Mexico. Their personal happiness was crowned 2 years later with the birth of their daughter, Maria Elena. She arrived on a warm spring morning, her first cries mingling with the sound of lambs bleating in the nearby pasture. Elena held their child with wonder, marveling at the tiny fingers and perfect features that represented their love made manifest. Samuel had thought he knew what love felt like, but holding his daughter for the first time opened up new depths of emotion he hadn't known existed. This small person represented not just their future together, but the continuation of everything they had built. She would grow up knowing the security and love that Elena had been denied for so many years. As Maria grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Elena proved to be as devoted a mother as she was skilled a rancher, somehow managing to balance the demands of caring for a child with the work that kept their operation running smoothly. Samuel marveled at her energy and dedication, the way she could soothe a crying baby and then go out to help with a difficult calving without missing a beat. The Lazy W became known throughout the territory as a model of successful ranching, a place where innovation and tradition worked hand in hand to create something remarkable. Visitors came from as far away as California to see Elena's breeding programs and study their approaches to water conservation and pasture management. But success hadn't changed the fundamental character of their life together. They still sat on the porch in the evenings, now with Maria playing at their feet, watching the sun set over the land they loved. They still worked side by side during the day, sharing the satisfaction of tasks completed and challenges overcome. The ranch was more prosperous than Samuel had ever dared dream, but it was still fundamentally a home where love and hard work created something greater than the sum of its parts. On an evening in late summer, as they celebrated the 10th anniversary of Elena's arrival at the ranch, Samuel reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Elena sat beside him in the rocking chair she had brought to the porch years ago, Maria sleeping peacefully in her arms. The pastures stretched out before them, green and dotted with healthy livestock, a testament to what they had accomplished together. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that morning when you saw me riding up? Elena asked quietly, echoing his own thoughts. Samuel considered the question seriously. I think about it sometimes. I probably would have lost the ranch within the year, spent my old age bitter and alone, wondering where I went wrong. He reached over to touch her hand. What about you? What would have happened if you hadn't decided to stop here? Elena was quiet for a moment, her fingers gentle as she stroked their daughter's hair. I don't know. I was pretty desperate when I found you. I might have kept drifting until I found somewhere else to land, but I don't think I would have found home. This place, this life we've built. It's everything I dreamed of when I was growing up, listening to my father talk about what it meant to work the land with honor. Samuel felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came with deep emotion. Your father would be proud of what you've accomplished. Not just the success of the ranch, but the woman you've become, the family you've created. I think he would be, Elena agreed. And I think he would have liked you very much. You have the same respect for the land, the same understanding that real wealth comes from building something that will last. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Maria stirred in Elena's arms but didn't wake, secure in the knowledge that she was safe and loved. The sounds of the ranch settling down for the night surrounded them, the distant lowing of cattle, the whisper of wind through the grass, the soft sounds of horses moving in the corral. I have something for you, Samuel said suddenly, remembering the small package he had hidden in his jacket pocket. Elena looked at him with curiosity as he produced a small wrapped bundle. Inside was a delicate silver locket, engraved with the image of a sheep and the words, Elena Whitmore, partner in love. It's beautiful. Elena breathed, her eyes bright with tears. But you didn't need to get me anything. Having this life, this family, it's gift enough for a dozen lifetimes. Samuel fastened the locket around her neck, his fingers gentle against her skin. 10 years ago, a stranger came to my door offering to work for nothing but room and board. She gave me everything I didn't even know I was missing. I wanted you to have something that would remind you how much that gift has meant. Elena kissed him softly, careful not to disturb their sleeping daughter. I love you, Samuel Whitmore. Thank you for seeing who I could be instead of just who I was when I arrived. Thank you for making me believe in the future again, Samuel replied. Thank you for turning a failing ranch into a home. As they rose to carry Maria inside for the night, Samuel took one last look at the land that had become their kingdom. The lazy W stretched out under the star-filled sky, peaceful and prosperous. A testament to what could be accomplished when two people joined their dreams and worked toward a common goal. Elena had come to him as a stranger offering her labor in exchange for a place to belong. She had become his partner, his wife, the mother of his child, and the architect of their shared success. What had begun as a simple transaction had evolved into something profound and lasting, a love story written in sweat and soil and the quiet satisfaction of work well done. The drought that had nearly destroyed the ranch was now just a memory, replaced by the careful water management systems Elena had designed. The debt that had once threatened to take everything was gone, replaced by financial security built on innovation and hard work. The loneliness that had filled the empty rooms of the ranch house had been replaced by the warmth of family and the knowledge that love could indeed be found in the most unexpected places. Samuel Whitmore had learned that sometimes the greatest gifts come not from those who have much to offer, but from those who offer everything they have. Elena Vasquez had arrived with nothing but her willingness to work and her determination to build a better life. In giving her a chance, Samuel had received far more than he had given, discovering that true partnership was about creating something together that neither could achieve alone. As they tucked Maria into her crib and prepared for sleep, Samuel reflected on the strange alchemy that had transformed two wounded people into a family, a struggling ranch into a success story, and a business arrangement into a love that would last a lifetime. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities, but they would face them together, just as they had every day for the past 10 years. The stranger who had come not to beg but to offer herself had found more than just a home at the Lazy W Ranch. She had found her destiny, and in doing so, she had given Samuel his. It was, he thought as he drifted off to sleep beside his wife, exactly the kind of ending his father would have appreciated. Practical and romantic all at once, grounded in the enduring truth that honest work and genuine love were the only currencies that really mattered in the end. Far Marsa